Hi, and welcome to Anatomy of Guilt. They say reality is stranger than fiction, and in this case, you will see why. This case is about a string of murders and attacks that happened in the city of Kobe, Japan, in the year 1997. The city of Kobe was just hit by a devastating earthquake on 17th January 1995, and it took the lives of more than 6,000 people. The quake struck in the pre-dawn darkness of that day. In 20 seconds of violence that registered 6.9 on the moment magnitude scale, that is 7.2 on the Richter scale. Virtually every part of the Japanese port city of Kobe suffered major damages. The quake cost more than $100 billion in damages. The survivors picked their way through a nightmare landscape of ruins and rubble. The Kobe government spent years reconstructing new facilities to attract back the 50,000 people who had left after the quake. It had been 2 years since the quake, and the city was still recovering from the losses, rebuilding their homes and their lives, when this gruesome, horrific crime occurred. It would send shockwaves through the very heart of Kobe, leaving its residents deeply unsettled. On March 15, 1997, Asaka Yamashita was playing in her neighborhood when she was attacked from behind on her head with a hammer. On the same day, just 200 meters from the attack on Asaka, he attacked another girl with a knife, stabbing her stomach. She was 9 years old. After stabbing her, he managed to escape unrecognized. She was rushed to the hospital where she survived the attack. 12 days later, Asaka Yamashita died of the head injuries she suffered. Now, after a couple of months, on May 10th, 1997, a group of young girls were attacked by somebody with a hammer in Kobe. Miraculously, they all managed to escape relatively unharmed. There are reports that suggest that shortly before the attacks, dead remains of animals were being found around the same area: a headless bird, a pawless cat, which we will come back to. But then, on the morning of May 27, 1997, several hours before the students began their classes, the janitor at the Tainohata Elementary School made a gruesome discovery. Placed at the gates near the entrance to the school was the decapitated head of a young boy. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered that the perpetrator had inserted something inside the victim's mouth. It was a note, written in Japanese and also containing some misspelled English words, such as "Shul Killer," with a distinctive style and red ink lettering. The note made reference to future murders and also challenged the police to catch him. The little kid whose head was found in front of the elementary school was going to his grandmother's house when he disappeared. His head had been beheaded with a handsaw, with further mutilations being done before being left in front of the school for students to discover when they arrived in the morning. The note that was found in June Haas's mouth read, "Well, now the game begins. Try and stop me, you thick-headed cops. I can't help but enjoy killing. I want nothing more than to see people die." This was written in Japanese but signed in misspelled English. It said, "Shul Killer." The horrifying crime shook Japan and its fabled sense of safety. The murder rate there was a fraction of that in the United States, and the children used to routinely walk the streets alone. But after June's head was discovered, police thought the youth had lured him to a cable TV antenna station, strangled him in the woodsy hillside area, and hid his body in the facility. The slain boy's peaceful Kobe neighborhood was frightened and transformed into a virtual fortress. A platoon of 400 police officers patrolled the neighborhood daily Parents formed convoys to escort children to school and kept them away from the playgrounds. The central government also dispatched counselors to the area to offer consultations to the parents and children suffering from the anxiety over the crime, some of whom were still shaken by the memory of the devastating earthquake that killed thousands and leveled miles of buildings in the Cove area in 1995. In the middle of this chaos, the killer sent a taunting letter to the police, signed Sieto Sakakibara. The police started getting tips from all over the town. Suspicious neighbors reported odd behaviors and alleged sightings of potential culprits. The police had to sift through more than 3,500 tips. But, as is often the case, most leads were dead ends. The sheer volume of information had actually slowed down the investigation as detectives had to sift through each tip, trying to separate the fact from fiction. Despite the information, none of the early tips directly identified the killer. However, they helped the police build a general profile of the perpetrator, narrowing down the suspect pool. The letter, written in red ink, was a chilling manifesto. It called out the police for their incompetence and declared, "This is the beginning of the game," and went on to say, "I am putting my life at stake for the sake of this game. If I'm caught, I'll probably be hanged. Police should be angrier and more tenacious in pursuing me. It's only when I kill that I am liberated from the constant hatred that I suffer and that I am able to attain peace. It is only when I give pain to people that I can ease my own pain." The letter also made mention of the Japanese educational system, calling it compulsory education that formed me an invisible person. It appeared that Sakakibara wanted more attention towards himself and recognition for his crimes, something that he intended would cause panic in the community. During the initial press coverage, the Japanese media mistakenly reported the name of the killer as Onibara, which translates to Demon's Rose. However, the killer insisted his alias was as he gave it, Sakakibara Syoto. Infuriated by this mix-up, Sakakibara sent another letter to the station. He wrote to the station threatening them that from now on, if you misread my name or spoil my mood, I will kill 3 vegetables a week. If you think I can only kill children, you are greatly mistaken. This use of the word vegetables would be later explained by the killer, referring to the people around him. Having learned this term from his parents, who had once told him, "If you are nervous at your athletic meet, picture the people around you as vegetables," it appeared the killer wanted and craved more attention, and attention towards him and for his crime. It appeared likely that Sakakibara had intended to imitate the Zodiac killer, possibly because he wanted to be immortalized in the same way other serial killers had been by society and the media. The tone was confident, almost mocking, and its details confirmed that the writer was indeed the killer. For the police, it was a vital clue, but also a trap. The calculated nature of the letter misled both the public and the investigators. Profilers assumed the killer was a man in his 30s or 40s, someone experienced, methodical, and perhaps with a history of violence. After all, who else could commit such a gruesome act with such control? This assumption shaped the investigation in the beginning, leading the police to focus on adult suspects and overlook key signs pointing to a much younger perpetrator. And newspapers were also filled with speculations that the killer was a man in his 30s or 40s, possibly a former police officer who is knowledgeable about the ways to conceal a crime. Since the killer took care not to leave his fingerprints, for instance, and wrote his chilling notes on standard grade of paper, nearly impossible to trace. Among the noise were reports of disturbing behavior by a young boy in the area, someone who had been seen harming animals. But these accounts didn't fit the narrative the police had constructed, so they didn't immediately act on them. A real breakthrough came when investigators revisited their assumptions. As the tips kept rolling in, the behavior profile began to shift. The letter, while calculated, also contained signs of immaturity, phrases and language that suggested the killer could be younger than originally thought. Additionally, crime scenes themselves, while gruesome, lacked the kind of finesse typically associated with older, experienced criminals. The capture of Sakakibara. The hunt for the killer finally ended in 49 days from the day when June Haas's decapitated head was found. Police made an arrest in the case on June 28, 1997, and to the surprise of the whole country, a 14-year-old junior school student was arrested and questioned in connection with the murder. Because of Japanese laws prohibiting the mentioning of the minor's name by the press, the suspect was only referred to as Boy A in the articles and news reports. Shortly after his arrest, the boy confessed to the February 1997 attacks on 3 schoolgirls, who were very lucky to escape unharmed, as well as another murder, that of a 10-year-old girl, Ayaka Yamashita, who was found fatally bludgeoned with a steel hammer on March 16, 1997. After the attack, Boy A wrote in his diary, quote, "I carried out sacred experiments today to confirm how fragile human beings are. I brought the hammer down when the girl turned to face me. I think I hit her a few times, but I was too excited to remember." End quote. The following week, on March 23rd, he wrote, quote, "This morning, my mom told me, 'Poor girl, the girl attacked seemed to have died. There is no sign of me being caught. I thank you, Bamoi Dokishin, for this. Please continue to protect me.' Investigators were unable to learn the meaning or identity of this word, Bamoi Dokishin, which continues to remain unclear. Not much is known about the boy's childhood, except that he was known originally to enjoy torturing and killing small animals before progressing onto young children. He wrote in his diary, "When I advanced to junior high school, I had already become bored of killing cats and gradually found myself fantasizing about how it would feel to murder human beings like me." He admitted to mutilating a variety of animals, including decapitating pigeons, and recalled one particular story in his childhood when he lined up a row of frogs in a street and rode over them with his bicycle. He also enjoyed playing with dangerous objects as early as elementary school, writing, quote, "I can ease my irritation when I'm holding a survival knife or spinning scissors like a pistol." Although he was deemed by social workers to be mentally unstable, his mother pressured Boy A into taking and passing the entrance exam needed to enter a prestigious school. But this pressure had only added to his violent and aggressive tendencies, causing him to suffer from internal bitterness as well as having an effect on his interactions with the people around him. During a search of his bedroom after his arrest, police found thousands of comic books and pornographic videos, which some suggested might have fueled his homicidal killing spree. Some Japanese politicians, such as Shizuka Kami, were quick to blame the media and society in general, and calling for a restriction of objectionable content. He stated, "Movies lacking any literary or educational merit made just for showing cruel scenes. Adults should be blamed for this, and that incident gives adults the chance to rethink the policy of self-imposed restrictions on these films." and whether they should allow them just because they are profitable. A number of people, including Shojiro Goto, a lawyer who dealt with many false accusation cases, as well as Nobuyoshi Iwata, the former principal of the junior high school that boy A had attended, insists that he was wrongfully accused and point out several contradictions in the statements of the investigating authorities. They point to the fact that investigators said one of the murders was committed by a left-handed person, while boy A is right-handed. The young suspected killer had bad grades at school, and yet his confession was so complex, if not somewhat cryptic, and contained many elaborate figures of speech and similes. It also contained many absurd statements and claims of things that would be impossible for a 14-year-old to do. Because he confessed to his crimes, boy A was sentenced to a youth reformatory for treatment, mainly because he was under the age of 16 and so could not be tried as an adult. Because of this crime being committed by a child under the age of 16, in the year 2000, Japan's bicameral legislature lowered the age for criminal responsibility from 16 to 14. However, after the Sasebo slashing of June 1st, 2004, in which Satomi Mitarai was murdered by an 11-year-old girl called Girl A, there has been renewed discussions for the need for further revision. For many, there was never any doubt about his guilt. In 2002, the boy's mother visited him in prison and asked him if he had really committed the crimes, to which he confirmed he had murdered both the children. In an unprecedented act, the Japanese Ministry of Justice announced on March 11, 2004, that Sakakibara, 21 years old at the time, was to be released on a provisional basis, with a full release on January 1st, 2005. Because the government had taken the unusual step of notifying the public, critics have argued that it was likely Sakakibara was not fit for release and instead should be transformed to prison to serve out the remainder of his sentence. This criticism was further exacerbated some 3 months later in the wake of the Sasebo slashing. The Memoir of a Killer. Because he was judged to be cured of his sexual sadism and compulsion to kill, Sakakibara was released on parole in 2004 due to the seriousness of his crimes and the fact that they had been committed by a minor. Sakakibara's name and new residence were intended to remain a highly guarded secret. However, his real name, Shinichiro Azuma, had already been leaked by the press and circulated on the internet since June 29, 1997. Originally, both the public and victim's family were notified of his release and whereabouts. However, after 2004, he was no longer required to report his location and soon dropped out of sight and from the public scrutiny, living his life largely anonymous. It wasn't until the year 2015 that he would again feature in the news, when he decided to release a tell-all book that would bring him back into the spotlight. On June 10th, 2015, Sakakibara, then aged 32, released his controversial autobiography through Ohota Publishing titled Zekka. His memoir, which served as a recollection of his crime and time in prison, would vividly recount the murder of June Haas, the details of which had never been reported by the media. Azuma claims to have strangled and eventually decapitated June Haas on the slopes of the nearby mountain using a handsaw. He then carried the boy's body into the bathroom at his home, where he locked himself in and committed a deed far more heinous than murder. This deed, to which he alludes most likely, refers to the committing of sexual acts with June's corpse, as Sakakibara calls himself an incorrigible sexual deviant. There is also an essay that he wrote in school and he shared with his friend that led to even more suspicions rising against him. The title of the essay was 13 years of imprisonment. He wrote in his memoir, "This 13 years of imprisonment was created by taking words I liked from books about serial killings and the movie Predator 2, rearranging and combining them. Perhaps I was struggling in my own way to resist the irresistible urge to kill that lurked within me. I showed this document to my classmate Dafun, and he typed it up neatly for me. I spoke to Dafun about my nihilistic view of life, also hinted at the crimes I had committed, and confessed that I had gained sexual excitement from killing cats. Dafun spread this around the school, and the rumors circulated that I was the perpetrator of the March incident. About a month later, on May 14th, I saw Dafun on my way home from school and invited him to the Triangle Park. Placing my bag on a bench, I entered the sandbox alone. Standing in the middle of the sandbox, I turned to face Dafun with an awkward smile that was unnaturally strained due to my lack of practicing smiling. I said, "Hey Dafun, how about a duel?" Striking a pose like Bruce Lee, I beckoned him with a provocative gesture, inviting Dafun into the sandbox. Dafun was enthusiastic at first, saying, "Oh, sounds good, let's do it," and entering the sandbox, striking his signature perverted mask pose in response. I seized the opportunity to land a powerful blow to his exposed stomach. Dafun groaned, fell to the side, clutching his abdomen with one hand and extending the other towards me. His palm open, his face turned pale, and beads of sweat formed on his temples. While coughing painfully, he said, "Wait, hold on, are you serious?" Instead of answering, I took a metal watch out of my pocket and deliberately, in slow motion, wrapped it around my right fist like brass knuckles, so Dafun could see it clearly. His expression changed. "I'm going home," he said, and tried to flee the sandbox. I grabbed him by the collar and punched his face and head several times with my watch wrapped fist. Dafun was screaming loudly, but I relentlessly struck his wide open mouth as he screamed, feeling his teeth crack against my watch. When my hand started to hurt, I stopped hitting him. Dafun fell to his knees and hands in the sandbox, begging, sobbing. I then took a knife from my belt, unsheathed it, and crouched in front of Dafun's face, slowly running the knives back from the base to the tip to instill fear. Dafun, who had been crying and breathing heavily, suddenly stopped and held his breath. In the next moment, he quickly straightened up and threw sand in my face. Sand flew into my mouth and eyes, causing me to lose balance and fall backward, clutching my face. Taking advantage of this, Dafun left his bag in the park and ran home. I stood up, squinting and half crouched, with my outstretched hands feeling around like insects' antennae. I made my way to the water tap near the sandbox and rinsed my eyes and mouth. Despite the intensity of the violence, I felt no emotions at that moment. What was I trying to achieve? Even now, looking back, I don't truly understand why I hit Dafun. Saying because he spread bad rumors might make it easier to understand, but I knew Dafun's personality better than anyone. He couldn't keep quiet if he heard an unusual story. Humans sometimes have a puzzling tendency to express manufactured emotions. It's fine when raw, genuine emotions arise naturally from deep within, and we try to rationalize them. The problem arises when the brain unconsciously generates unconfirmed thoughts that trigger emotionless emotions. These fake emotions act as if they naturally emerged from within, guiding the body? Are the anger and joy you usually feel truly 100% pure? Emotions from within you? In his book, he has also described how he attacked the victims and what drove him to murder. He wrote in his memoir, "I suddenly became scared of what I had done. But no matter how much time passed, no one realized that I had done such a thing," which was anticlimactic. Life didn't change at all. Even if you engage in abnormal behavior, daily life continues as usual. That intense feeling of discomfort cannot be put into words. Normal life, the same routine as usual, sometimes accelerates sanity all at once. Was that a dream? Did I not do anything in reality? These were the questions in the mind of the killer, as he wrote in his memoir. Around 10,000 copies of the first edition of the book, the memoir, were given the green light for publication, something the victims' families were not made aware of beforehand. The president of Ota Publishing, Satoshi Oka, said in a statement, "We have never had the opportunity to read the personal account of a juvenile criminal at this level. Although I understand this book will receive great deal of criticism, I believe that the book details events that speak to issues of juvenile criminal accountability which are still relevant today." The families of the victims, specifically June Haas's family, along with many advocates for the victims, had objected to and attempted to keep Zeka from being published. But ultimately, the book was released. Despite one bookstore chain refusing to stock the book, it became an instant success and quickly reached the top of Japanese bestseller lists. The royalties from the sale of the book were to be paid to Sakakibara, something which only contributed to the outrage from the families of the victims. It was reported that Sakakibara, who is still referred to as Boy A by the media and in legal documents, sent a personal note of apology attached to a copy of the copy, which he intended to be delivered to the members of the bereaved families of his victims. It was reported that he now realizes the gravity of his crimes that he had committed as a teenager. Mamuro Hase, the father of June Hase, issued a statement in which he said, "I don't know if the murderer of our child published this book to further extend out the endless suffering. It shows he doesn't really feel bad about doing what he did. I wish this book would be pulled immediately and that no more copies be printed." Several months later, Sakakibara set up a vanity website in which he posted bizarre photoshopped images of a nude male, whom he suggested were of himself. In response to these controversies, the tabloid Shukan Post decided to publicize Sakakibara's real name, which was Shinichiro Azuma, along with his occupation at the time and his location. Soon afterwards, he once again faded from the public eye, despite the heinous crimes he committed. It seems he has continued to live a normal life. Because of the callous and inhuman nature of his crimes, and the fact that he was one of the most infamous of child killers, the murders committed by Sakakibara were the primary reason why the Japan's bicameral legislature lowered the age for criminal responsibility in 2000 from 16 to 14. But it would come too late to stop his release at the age of 21. And after only 6 years, he completed his rehabilitation sentence as a medical juvenile reformatory. He was set free. His case has sent shockwaves throughout the Japanese society, and due to the similarities between his letters and those of the San Francisco Bay killer, Sakakibara would be referred to as the Zodiac number 3 by some publications. Although he was caught and served a sentence for his crimes, there has been much debate about whether or not justice had actually been served. and if the murder of the two young children had really been punished. One thing is certain about the Sakakibara murders, that it was horrific and unprecedented. Whenever I go through any of these true crime cases, I always wonder, why did they become like this? In the story of Zaka by the former boy A, it is not just a harrowing account of extreme violence, but also a cautionary tale about how neglect, isolation, and unresolved trauma can create a dangerous storm within a person. As we dig into how someone can develop into such a troubling figure, the question becomes clear: how can we, as individuals and as a society, prevent such things from happening? Here's what we know and what we can do about it. The roots of the deviance. What went wrong? When you trace back the path of the former boy A, you see a pattern that's all too familiar in cases of deviance and violence. It wasn't just one thing that caused his breakdown. It was a series of factors that compounded over time to make him what he became. Maybe he was not born a killer, and maybe, just maybe, he would not have become one either. The number one cause was emotional neglect that started early in his childhood. He grew up in a household where emotional support was scarce. While his parents were physically present, they failed to provide the emotional connection necessary for healthy development. His grandmother was his sole source of unconditional love. And when she passed, his emotional world completely collapsed. Children need validation and love to feel seen and valued. Without it, feelings of invisibility and insignificance can take root, distorting their worldview and making them feel like the world is an uncaring place. The isolation and alienation, which are silent killers. Former boy A frequently described himself as a nobody, a person who felt overlooked and disconnected from his peers and family. And over time, this alienation became a breeding ground for fantasies of power and control. His way of asserting his existence in a world that ignored him. What is the lesson for us? Social connection isn't just nice, it's essential. Alienation leads to otherness, which, if left unchecked, can grow into a dangerous sense of separation from society, which can lead to such behaviors. Number three is the unprocessed trauma that the child goes through. It is kind of an invisible wound. Losing his grandmother, the one and only person who made him feel loved, triggered a downward spiral, but instead of receiving help from his parents or from the society or school, he withdrew further into himself. Unable to process the grief, that pain turned inward, manifesting as anger and later violence. Grief is a universal experience, but we often don't give it the attention it deserves, especially in children. Early counseling and open conversations about loss can help individuals process their emotions in healthy ways. Number fourth cause can be when early signs of violence are ignored. The cruelty began with animals. He harmed them out of curiosity of death and a desire to assert control. What should have been a major red flag was dismissed or maybe unnoticed, allowing him to escalate from animals to people. Cruelty towards animals isn't just disturbing, it's often a precursor to further violence. Parents, teachers, and community members must act on these signs immediately, offering counseling and intervention to such kids who really need them. Now, as the chilling case of Shinichiro Azuma comes to a close, we are left with more questions than answers. How could someone so young commit acts so horrifying? Why did the society fail to intervene? before it was too late? And most importantly, how can we prevent such tragedies from happening again? This case is a sobering reminder that darkness can take root in places we least expect. It challenges us to look beyond appearances and pay attention to the early warning signs, whether it's cruelty to animals, emotional withdrawal, or social isolation. But this story also teaches us that prevention is possible by fostering empathy, supporting mental health, and addressing the needs of at risk youth. We can break the cycle before it begins. The lesson here is simple. We all have a role to play, whether as parents, teachers, friends, or neighbors. We can choose to listen, to act, and to create a society where no child feels invisible. Let us remember the victims of this tragedy, not just their names, but their potential, their innocence, and the lives they could have lived. And let their memory drive us to build a safer, more compassionate world for the generations to come. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.